Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our session on how to use your Tonic free trial. If you're here, maybe you've already set yourself up with a free account of Tonic and you're looking for some tips and guidance on how to get the most out of the platform. Welcome, you're in the right place. If you haven't yet created your account, head on over to app.tonic.ai, click create account so you can follow along with the steps that we'll show you today. So who are we here on the screen today? Very happy to introduce some all-stars on our team. We have Jack Rowe, one of our experienced AEs who will be guiding us through the Tonic platform today, and Josh Sandler, a guru solutions architect on our team who is on hand to answer all of your use case specific questions as well. And I'm Kiara Columbia. I'm on the marketing team here at Tonic and happy to be your host as always. One last note before I hand things over to Jack, we welcome your questions at any time. So please feel free to post them in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll make sure that our speakers see them and answer them for you live. All right, Jack, the mic is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And what I'm going to open up here to start is going to be not the first thing that you'll see when you sign up for the free trial, but this will be essentially the page that you're going to start at after you've created your account, confirmed your email address, done all of that fun stuff. So right now, what we're going to be doing is creating a workspace in Tonic. And essentially a workspace is, where you're going to have all of the access to Tonic's capabilities. For de-identifying data, you're going to be able to eventually pick and choose the fields that you want to de-identify, the relationships you want to maintain, all in the effort to creating the most realistic possible fake version of your source data. And so to start, we need access to a source database in your sandbox and to an output database of the same type. And so we have options down here for what kind of database that you want to connect to. We can go ahead and just click in on a Postgres here. And essentially, you'll need to connect to a source database like you see here, and you'll fill in all that information on your side. If there are IP addresses that you need to whitelist in order to get access, then those are available on our frequently asked questions page. And as Josh kindly reminded me to remind you all, if your database is not publicly accessible on the internet, you won't be able to access it with our Tonic cloud. So that would be a situation where we need to install Tonic in your environment. And that's a conversation we're happy to have if that is the case. But for now, if you're going to access the data on the sandbox, it does need to be publicly accessible. Now, the other situation you can consider here, if you would like to use the sandbox, but you don't feel comfortable sending your data to the Tonic cloud, then what we can do is just click on this Create Sample Workspace button. And this is what I'm actually going to do today. It's the same demo data set that we use for our typical demos, and it's sample retail stored data. So it might look similar to what you're using, depending on what line of business you're in. It might not, but it will give you the ability to fully flesh out and test Tonic's capabilities on a realistic set of data. So I can pause there if there's any questions, but if not, I'm happy to jump ahead here. And the other thing I'll point out, we have lots of different options on the kinds of databases that you can connect to here as well.
I don't see any questions coming in yet, but thanks, Jack.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just click this sample workspace. You can name this whatever you want. I'm just going to say Jack Sandbox for now. And the first thing that's going to happen once we connect to a source database with Tonic is going to be this sensitivity scan that you just saw running up here on the top left. And the sensitivity scan is essentially just a first pass at your source data. And it's going to review the columns and the tables and identify what is typically sensitive. Now, of course, what's sensitive to you might be very different than what's sensitive to somebody else. Everyone's data is different. Everyone's needs are different. But these are just some things that are typically sensitive to most folks. And we can come down here actually and hover over a few of these and just give you an idea of what it's grabbing, things like first name, last name, gender, email. I'll go ahead and click in on this email column here. In this case, Tonic's either looking at the actual column name itself, where it literally says email, to identify this column, or it's looking at the data within the column using a variety of techniques and determining that these appear to look like email addresses. And then the next thing that's happening is Tonic's also going to recommend to anonymize this column with an email generator. we can actually apply that right from here in the Privacy Hub as well. And now that I've applied that generator, the other thing I want to point out about the Privacy Hub, not only is this where you're going to start out with your data, but this is a great place to check back in as you're working through a particular database and de-identifying it, because we're giving you this breakdown here of what's sensitive and what's not in your database at the table level. So, maybe you have somebody who's been working on the customers table and you need to check back in as a team and determine, okay, what's really important for us to focus on next. And you come in here and say, okay, we haven't protected anything in customers legacy and there's still 6 columns at risk. So nice place to check back in once you've gotten some of the data de-identified and once you've gone through and picked out what's sensitive to you. The other thing that I like to add here, in addition to the sensitivity scan, which is going to go through and identify things that are typically sensitive, you're always going to have the option in Tonic to manually mark things as sensitive. So there's toggles up here right out of the Privacy Hub. And I'll be able to show you a little bit later on when we get to the table view, there's a few other ways that we can mark things as sensitive. But when we want to actually start de-identifying data and making changes to our database really rapidly and in bulk, we can come on down to the database view. And we have a few things happening here. We have all of our tables are over here on the left-hand side, and then all of the columns in this database are on the right-hand side. With the tables, there's a few different options that we have. I can really quickly, let's just say there are certain tables that I know aren't going to be relevant to the output data. Logs, indexes, other irrelevant information, nothing important for referential integrity, etc. We can really quickly just truncate those. If there are tables where you're not worried about the sensitivity of the data, but you'd still like them to be included in the output, then we can just preserve them and send them through as they are. But I think for the webinar today, we'll stick with de-identifying. And a couple of things that we can do here. I'm going to jump over to all these columns on the right-hand side, and we can actually start to filter these by a number of things. You can see we've got things like sensitivity, protection, destination data, et cetera. Lots of different options here on how to filter it. I'm going to stick right now with grabbing everything that is sensitive and everything that hasn't yet been protected. Now, sensitive in this case just means everything that the sensitivity scan has already grabbed automatically and anything that you've flagged manually yourself. And not protected are just all the columns that we haven't de-identified yet or applied a generator to. And so by grabbing both of those, this is now a to-do list of everything that needs to be de-identified in this data set before you would feel comfortable provisioning this down into a lower environment for testing purposes, for development purposes, whatever the case might be. This would be a nice way to keep track of all of that. Now, a few other things that we can do while we're in the database view, we can actually start to de-identify things in bulk. So say we wanted to save some time and grab all of the first names at once and de-identify those. We can do that with a bulk edit generator. So we do that search up top for the correct field, and then we can grab all these columns. And now I'll apply a name generator. And a few things to note. So I did that search there to grab the name generator. And now we're going to have a few options. Since these are first names, I'm just going to stick with first. But depending on how your data is stored, say you had as a first last column, first middle last, we have all the options here for de-identifying that appropriately. And now that we've applied that, we can come in here and see Alexandra's mapping out to Christine, John to Nicole, Robert to Marshall, so on and so forth. But as you may notice down here, we actually have a situation where we have 2 Melissas mapping out to 2 separate outputs. Now, in certain circumstances, that might be exactly what you want to have happen. Names are even often an example of that, where you would want different names to map out to different outputs. But just for example here, let's say that this was a unique identifier field, something like a social security number or an email address, anything that you wouldn't want mapping out to different outputs for each input. Say, for example, we have 1,000 social security numbers in the source data. They each appear twice. We wouldn't want there to be 2,000 unique social security numbers in the output data. It's just inherently not going to make as much sense. And so in situations like that, and along with a variety of others, we have a feature called consistency that is going to allow us to generate a consistent result each time. So you can see here now, Melissa is mapping out to Rosella in both instances. And this example is again, not perfect because this is for names here. And this is also happening within a column, but consistency will work across columns, across tables, and even across disparate database sources. For any column that had consistency turned on, and you had the same input in that column, you're going to get the same output. I think it looked like there was a question that came in. Kiara, do we want to pause for that now?
Yeah, I'm just typing up an answer just about whether or
Okay.
not the session will be recorded. And yes, it is being recorded, but I'll type up more of an answer for the question asked. Thanks.
Perfect. All right. So from here, we've taken a look at consistency and some of the functionality of the database view. What I want to jump down into next is the table view. And the great thing about what's happening in the table view is we're storing some records in memory so that we can visualize the changes that are happening to the data as we're making them. And one of the really, unique things about Tonic, not only are we going to give you the ability to de-identify all of these different types of columns and data, but as we're doing so, we're going to make sure that we're really approximating the source data. So the output is really realistic and really useful when you're trying to test your software, develop new software, any situation where you're going to need realistic data. And the way that we do that is, one, we're going to preserve, statistical properties and relationships that exist within columns. And we're also going to give you the ability to tie columns together. And you add that in with functions like consistency, and the output is going to be a synthetic data set that really approximates the source. So just to give you an example of that, we'll go through here and apply a few more generators. We'll do a last name generator here. For gender, I like to dig into this one a little bit more. We're going to apply a categorical generator. And this is going to shuffle the values in this column, but importantly, maintain the same ratio as the source. So we're still going to have the same ratio of male to females here. And if we scroll down here, we should also see some nulls. There'll be the same ratio of nulls in this column as well. We don't want to clean up your data per se. We want to, as accurately as possible, represent it in that output. So if there's nulls in the source, we do want those to appear in the same statistical relationship as they would in the source data. Now, this email column over here, we actually already de-identified this earlier up in the Privacy Hub. If we take a look here now, though, you can see there are a few more options of how we can de-identify emails. You can set this up to run 2 custom domains if you'd like to. So we can switch all these to Tonic AI. You can exclude certain domains. You can also turn on consistency here. You could replace invalid emails. So lots of different options for handling those. A few other things that you could do here. We can also turn on a character scramble. And I like to show this here on the email column, just because essentially what's happening here is it's like a smart ipsum lorem. So we're going to preserve the number of characters, the capitalization, the punctuation, but each value is going to be replaced by a random letter. So essentially, we're going to allow you to preserve the shape of the text here, but it is going to be totally de-identified and safe to use. And this is also a generator that will allow you to turn on consistency. A few other ones that a lot of our customers are making really heavy use of. We have a conditional generator that will allow you to de-identify data on a row-by-row basis if certain criteria are met. If store membership card equals yes, de-identify. If not, no. Maybe that's not like a perfect example of how you would want to use it, but it's that sort of logic that applies. So lots of different use cases there for that. We have a custom categorical generator that will allow you to define your own library of terms. So say you have something really industry specific, or a particular line of business with a set number of products that you're offering or something like that. You can really quickly define that list. And you can also define the ratios that you want each category to appear in. So for example, here I have the 2 Fs. Those should appear at twice the frequency of any of the other letters in this case. But yeah, this is a great way to just be able to define your own library really quickly and on the fly. And then lastly, I'll jump over to this regex mask. The regex mask is great because it's going to allow you to use regular expressions to define just the particular part or piece of data that you want to de-identify. So say for the example of this email address, we'd be able to use regular expressions to, if we just wanted to de-identify the initial part of the email address, anything prior to the @hotmail.com, we could set up some logic like that. Josh might have some more clear examples and be a little bit better at actually defining those regular expressions than I am. But it's essentially that's the functionality of it. But aside from all those generators, like I mentioned before, the real value in Tonic is not necessarily in just being able to de-identify all of the different types of data that you have. It's in being able to approximate that source data as we do so. And the next step in doing that is going to be to start tying some columns together. And this data set that we're working with right now, as I mentioned before, is sample retail store data. And there's a couple of relationships here that I know to be true. In this case, I know that customers with higher annual income on average spend more money at my store in this largest bill amount field. I also know that store members spend more money on average than non-members. So we want to preserve that as we de-identify it. And we also want to preserve the statistical properties of these columns themselves. So to do that, we're going to apply a continuous generator here to annual income. And what's happening here, this is changing the values in this column within a set range. So they're all still going to be 5- and 6-figure salaries. And the other thing that's doing is it's making sure there's the same distribution of incomes in this case as there are in the source column. So we're preserving the shape of that column there. And then we can come over to largest bill amount. We'll apply the same generator type. So same preservation there of the statistical properties in that column. But this time we're going to link that back to annual income. And now the de-identified output of largest bill amount is a function of annual income's de-identified output. So we're preserving that relationship in the de-identified output data. And then just to take it a step further and add another layer of nuance here, I'll use that categorical generator I showed earlier on the store membership card here. So we'll still have that same ratio of members to non-members. And now we can come back to largest bill amount and partition that by the store membership card. So that relationship staying intact as well.
I have a question for you that came in, and I think it kind of answers it, but when it comes to linking columns, do you need to always link same generator to same generator? And how does it difference between linking versus partitioning?
Yeah, I can help answer that one.
Thanks,
so in general, linking is going to be between generators of the same type. So examples would be like our address generator, linking a city to a state to a zip to make sure that they are, a valid combination of those, for example. Or in the case of like continuous linking, it's sort of treating one number as a function of the other. And so those are going to link together. Now partitioning will be a bit different. You can partition, for example, the continuous by the categorical column, or even you might not de-identify the membership card. And when we are partitioning it, as I mentioned, sort of with continuous, what we're doing is basically, maintaining the distribution of the amount. So, if you think that it's like, a bell curve distribution of your, incomes or largest bill amounts, you can think that we're, maintaining that. But, if you were to look at your data set, you might notice that actually kind of your store members and your non-members really have different distributions and you want to keep those. So partitioning allows us to sort of like, calculate those distributions separately partitioned by each of those amounts.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Josh. All right, jumping back into the demo here. After we've linked those columns together, there's a few other questions that'll come up here a lot. One of those is, how does Tonic handle data that's stored in JSON columns? You can see over here, we've got this JSON column, and I'm going to jump back over here. If you remember earlier in the demo, we de-identified all of the first names in the database, right? So all of the first names should be de-identified. If I turn off preview mode over here, we're now going to be able to take a look at the source data again. And you can see we have this first name coming up here, Alexandra Sanford, and I'll turn preview mode back on so we can see the de-identified output of Leonida. But if I come back over to this JSON column, Alexandra's still leaking through. So to solve for this, Tonic has a JSON mask generator, and it works a little bit differently than our other generators in that you will need to identify the correct path expression for the value that you want to de-identify. If you know what that is, you can type it in up here. But if you have fat fingers like myself and you don't want to type in front of the whole webinar, the nice thing about the UI is you can actually just click around over here and it'll pull the correct path expression for you. So we're just going to grab first name, or name.first in this case, and Now we're going to apply a name generator like we would anywhere else in the platform. We'll do first, we'll turn on consistency as well. And now we should have, oh, I don't think I applied it. Sorry about that, folks. Got to hit save generator down here, but my Zoom toolbar is hiding the save button. There we go. And now Alexandra's mapping out to Leonida in this column, just like it is over here. So that's how you apply generators to columns that are in JSON fields. You know, there's a few other things that we can do here. The generators will apply in the order that you want them to. So if you need to, if you're not sure where all the sensitive stuff is and there's only certain things that you want to allow through, you know, you can essentially whitelist certain columns and scramble the rest. So lots of different functionality there with the JSON. That being said, I do want to step away here from the table view. There's a couple of other functions within Tonic that I like to show off. We have a subsetter that is built in to Tonic. You might not have a chance to make use of this while you're in the sandbox, but essentially what the subsetter is going to allow you to do is using either a target where clause or a target percentage to find just the piece of data or the part of the data that you need and want to use. And then Tonic's going to make use of your foreign keys and grab just the minimally requisite amount of information that it needs in order to make sure that this piece of the data that you define stays referentially intact. But essentially what that's going to allow you to do is, you know, send out different parts of your data to different teams that need it. It's going to make the data much more portable. A lot of our customers who are using this for offshoring make really heavy use of this. You know, our customers with really large databases also make very heavy use of this. It's just a great way to make things more portable and to make sure that each team just has the particular piece of data that you need. You know, even remote developers now, you know, this is a great way to get something that can be shrunk down to the size that could, you know, easily fit on their laptops. They're not having to pull, you know, an entire staging database just to work on a simple problem. So that's our subsetter. Now, I did mention that the subsetter is going to be making use of our foreign keys. I'll jump over here to the foreign key tool real quick. The great thing about Tonic, it's going to grab all your foreign key relationships and store them here so that you can view them. Now, say, for example, your foreign keys aren't stored on the database side, you know, if they're on the application side or just depending on the type of database that you're making use of, we have the ability to add in virtual foreign key relationships here as well. And if you need to de-identify foreign key values as well anywhere else in your database, then Tonic can help you keep track of that as well. And the last thing that I think I wanted to show for today, unless I'm missing anything, I did want to jump over and show you guys some schema changes. Now, we haven't had any changes to that source database since I did connect to it. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to jump over to another one of my workspaces where I have had some changes happen to the source database, just to give you an example of what's going to happen here. Essentially, in schema changes, Tonic is going to alert you each time you run a job to any changes that have happened to that source data. So say a table was added somewhere, or, you know, a column of PII was renamed. You wouldn't want that to lead to a situation where, you know, PII or other sensitive information is now leaking into a lower environment unexpectedly. So with Tonic, we can identify that, alert you to the changes. You know, if you have this plugged into your Slack, you could get an alert there that says, hey, there was a schema change. And then we also have options for making sure, you know, let's just say you have Tonic set up to run in, you know, a scheduled cadence of jobs. We can block any new jobs from running down here until those schema changes are addressed, so that, you know, hey, that automatic, you know, generation that happens every Tuesday night for the DevOps team of that one particular subset of data, we're not going to run that job now until you've addressed those schema changes, because we don't want any sensitive information. And that, of course, is, you know, an optional toggle here, but we do like to mention that. And I guess that.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I guess the one thing that I did mention is Tonic does typically run in jobs. So everything that I just showed you is accessible via API. And most of our customers will actually use Tonic that way after they've gone through the UI, done initial setup, and you know, made use of the table view to make sure that everything looks the way that you want it to. Most folks will then plug into an automated system and have Tonic running on a scheduled cadence of jobs. But
Just knocked out two of the questions that I had for you, which was like, how frequently do people run generations typically? And also, does Tonic have an API? So thanks for jumping ahead and answering those. I think the last thing that I'd love people to just know about is that beautiful button up in the upper right, the generate data button.
Generate data, yes. We do need a destination database to connect to, but this is essentially what you'll be clicking when you want to run that job and generate the output data.
Awesome. All right. Let's see about any other questions that I have here for you. Maybe, well, I'd like to hear just both of your opinions on this. What do you think is the most undervalued capability within Tonic? Like, what do you think people should know more about?
That's a good question. I think just the number of generators and the number of ways that they can be used. We show a simple example here with, the name generator on names. And it's, that's one of the suggestions we make. And it's always maybe kind of the most obvious thing you think of if you see something like names. But there's really a lot of flexibility. And a lot of things in Tonic really, there's kind of a balance between privacy and utility in various ways. And it all depends a little bit on how you want to make use of the data. So kind of a specific example here on names, let's say, is that, you'll notice, for example, we replaced here, like Alexandra was the first name there, it became Leonida, or I don't know, whatever was on the second line, John became Ed. So, it went from a 4-character name to a 2-character name. The name generator is great. These are all human readable names. If I want to look at the data and it makes sense to me as something that I look for like a name, that's great. But what might be a type of bug that you're checking for? Maybe you've encountered bugs where a specific field, a value that's longer than you're expecting, and it caused you issues, and you want to make sure you maintain something like that. That would be a use case where maybe you would use the character scramble generator on first name. As Jack pointed out before, character scramble preserves capitalization and length and all those properties. So, these sort of values don't really look like nice, pretty names, but they more closely approximate some of the properties of the text as far as like its length and capitalization. So just different ways that you can use different generators, for different use cases. And for any given field, we probably got at least 2, 3, 4 generators that might be a viable, solution.
That's a great thing to point out. And it also leads into another question that I want to ask you, Josh. What's one of the more gnarly, complex data scenarios that you've seen Tonic handle, without going into detail, like obviously I'm not sharing?
I think definitely use of the regex has helped with a lot of those. Sometimes it's really necessary to break down some specific value into its component parts, like maybe there's a prefix and a, kind of like a postfix part of some kind of value that you need to be able to maintain and properly capture. And regex, kind of similar to the JSON, when you apply regex and choose those, they're called capture groups in regular expressions, it allows you to break a value down into component parts and then apply a generator to each of them. Or maintain the first character always, for example, and only change the trailing characters in some kind of identifier that has to meet a certain format. So something like regex can allow a lot of flexibility on some of those more complex scenarios.
Awesome. I think the only other question to cover is how can you get in touch? How can you request a demo? You can request a demo right on our website. There's a link in the upper right of the website. All right. Thank you all. Thanks to our speakers so much. This was a great demo. And Josh, thanks for answering all of our questions.